All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming live from our Joburg office. Good morning and welcome back to the opening bell with myself, Tshepo and Ashley. And this is brought to you by TD Markets and TD Markets Academy every Mondays to Fridays at 9, streaming live on YouTube. I trust and hope that everyone is doing well this morning, had a good week. So this morning, we're just gonna consolidate the information or what has been happening this week, right? It was a real fight in the markets this week. It was a real fight, right? You had your Middle East developments, Middle East conflict developments. You had your FOMC statement, Kevin Wash's first meeting. And so the markets was, at some point, the market was just pricing in certain things, right? Different things. At some point, the market was just still waiting for the meeting, of course, to happen, the announcement of the interest rates. So it was a real fight this week, right? It was one of the weeks where it doesn't happen as often. It doesn't happen as often, right? As much as there were movements, but there was a real fight. So in today's session, guys, we are just gonna consolidate the information. We're just gonna sort of like summarize what happened this week as far as the FOMC is concerned, and also just try and prepare for next week, right? Efficiently so the FOMC is what made headlines this week, together with a possible peace talk between the US and Iran, right? I just got an update right now on my email about the Middle East conflict. We'll talk about it. All right. So, what did we learn before we go to the charts? What did we learn about Kevin Wash? What did we learn about his first meeting and the FOMC statement overall? Right. So, interest rates in the US remain unchanged at 3.5%, but 3.50 to 3.75%. It's in the region of 3.5 to 3.75% as expected. All right. Even though the statement acknowledged there is economic activity, however, it remains solid. Economic activity remains solid, but inflation is still above the 2% target. So with that in mind, the statement also highlighted that the FOMC are not looking at cutting rates at the moment. They are just going to reinforce a higher for longer narrative and approach. All right. As a result, that's why we saw gold moving. That's why we saw gold melting. Right. That's why we saw the dollar strengthen and treasury yields remain elevated. All right. And also the dot plot. So that was the biggest surprise. The biggest surprise came from the updated dot plot. Instead of projecting a rate cut this year, the projection now points at one rate hike, right? A 125 basis point rate hike. All right. And this caused a division, right? This caused a division. There were 9 officials that expect at least one rate hike, and only one official within the FOMC that expects one rate cut. All right. So there was that division, but that dot plot of specifically mentioning a 25 basis point rate hike, right? That is where the biggest surprise was. That is where the biggest surprise was, right? And also, his press conference, right? His press conference, he alluded to the fact that, look, the Fed is still committed to returning inflation to 2%, right? And while making it clear that markets should stop relying on forward guidance and instead focus on incoming data. He mentioned that the Fed is going to stop hinting at things, right? Hence, he said the markets should stop relying on forward guidance, right? That means he's basically saying that the FOMC will stop hinting at things, while previously the FOMC kept hinting at certain things, all right? And then he further said, look, The economic releases such as your CPI, your PCE, retail sales, payrolls data are still as important and will have an even greater impact on the market pricing because the Fed intends to provide fewer policy clues in advance. All right. So this is just a summary of what happens. That's why we saw the dollar strengthen, right? The market didn't move from the actual announcement of the interest rates because the market had already priced in a possibility of rates being unchanged, right? The market reacted to these statements of, look, there's one rate hike coming. We're not gonna hint at things in advance. We're not gonna do this. We're not gonna do that. All of that, right? That's why the market moved, and that's why on yesterday's opening bell, Ashley went through the gold markets with you guys and all the other markets. I did the same during the trading room. I went through the gold market, the silver. If you guys missed the trading room, please go back and just watch it, get the analysis, right? But gold is moving in that direction, silver the same. So this morning here, right, we're going to talk about the crypto. But before we do that, just a bit of an update on the peace deal, the proposed peace deal from US and Iran, right? That has been called off. The US-Iran peace talks in Geneva have been called off, right? As I'm speaking to you right now, I just got the update, right? I'm just quickly scanning through the update, but it says Switzerland reportedly said US talks with Iranian negotiators on a pact to end the Middle East conflict would not take place on Friday, today, as Vice President J.D. Vance dropped plans to travel to Geneva. According to Reuters, Switzerland's foreign ministry confirmed that talks set for the mountaintop resort of Bergenstock would not take place. However, no further details were given. So it seems like the talks have been called off. So according to a report from the Guardian, the talks were cancelled as Hezbollah targeted Israeli forces and Israel carried out a wave of airstrikes in South Lebanon, which killed several people. The report added that cancellation of the talks between Iran and the US on Friday came so abruptly that Vance's staff and a small pack of journalists had to even gather at joint base outside Washington and so forth and so on. So this is what's happening, guys, right? The peace talks have been called off. Peace talks have been called off. At the beginning of the week, the market were pricing in the end of the war. Remember, sometimes the market do price in the rumor. So the rumor at the beginning of the week was that the war is going to end. Finally, we've been waiting. And the market was pricing that, right? Hence, you saw oil pushing down and so forth and so on. But now, that has been called off. That has been called off. So it's going to be interesting to see or to listen to any communication from the US president to just check the updates. All right. But yeah, so that is the update. Now let's go back to the business of the day. We've got Bitcoin, we've got Ethereum, world's number 1 and world's number 2 in crypto, right? Let's start with Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, last time we had mentioned that Bitcoin is going to push up and break 64,200. We mentioned this possibility. It happened. And according to this structure, the market had to break, go up, and at some point create a high, and then drop, because this is how the structure is, right? So that happened. It gave us a high and then it's dropping right now. So as it's dropping, it created a low at 62,248, right? That is the low that formed. And what we are noticing here is that we are noticing a bit of an interesting structure right here. A bit of an interesting structure right here, right? We've got a supply zone, and then we've got this structure around, which is around 63,300 and let's say 50 or 60, whatever the case is, right? So what we see here is, you see this low. If this low remains intact, if price does not break this low, then there's a possibility that you're going to get a slight pullback back to the zone. right? So the market breached this zone, broke this zone. So we may get this pullback to the zone. So that might be just an intraday move, right? And the idea here is to still continue the momentum pushing down, but we will see that once we reach that top. So the idea here is whenever we get a low, we're anticipating price to push back to the zone, the supply zone, and then we'll take it from there. So that is the intraday, intra-week movement we are keeping a very close eye on. So with Bitcoin, this is how it's looking this morning. All right. If you look at Ethereum, the same outlook as well. So I'm on the daily time frame on Ethereum, and we can see a high has formed similar to what Bitcoin did, and then price has pushed down. Now, where the market is right now, it is on the demand zone. This is the demand zone. We are on the demand zone, and on this demand zone, it seems like we could get a bit of a move towards the upside. Or let me put it this way: we are anticipating a slight move towards the upside. There could be profit taking around the zone, and we're anticipating once that profit taking start taking place, we're anticipating a bit of a push towards the upside. You see that? So the lower time frames here will really be important for this outlook, right? The lower time frames. So let's see what's going to happen there. So with Bitcoin and Ethereum, guys, right, the momentum is still bearish. The general momentum is still bearish. What's happening right now is these assets are trading at an area where we could get a pullback, and it's part of the structure, right? It's part of the structure. So if you're holding any sell positions, structurally, price will create lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, higher lows, and so forth and so on. So it's just part of the structure. So that is where trade management becomes very important. Trade management, risk management, trade management remains key. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, this is what we are looking at this morning. Crypto Friday, Bitcoin, Ethereum, gave you guys the fundamentals, what's happening. Please keep an eye on any developments around the peace talk, right? Because we could open up on Monday and the market could react insanely aggressive. So just keep a close eye on that, and then we'll come back on Monday, same time, same place, look at what happened over the weekend and take it from there. So that's it from us this week. Hope you guys had a good week. Let's do what we do best. Let's come back strong on Monday and let's carry on. Right? Cool stuff, guys. Have a good one. Enjoy yourself. Good luck. That's it from my side. We'll catch you guys on Monday. Cheers, guys.